the theme was violence as a public health issue, the crime challenge. And to have this conversation with me this morning, I'm joined by a very familiar face to Tobago Update, the former Commissioner of Police, Mr. Gary Griffith, who always makes the time to sit and chat with us once he has that time. So, good morning, Mr. Griffith, and thank you so much for taking the time out to chat about the symposium that was held.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Always my pleasure.
Um, Great. So you did not take part in the symposium at all, not even as a guest, but I'm guessing that you would have um, watched it online live along with the rest of us.
Yes. I wasn't invited for obvious reasons. When it is you have ego and bitterness taking precedence over trying to do what is right for the country and circle the wagons, that was expected. So yes, I was I did see it. In a nutshell, what I can say is that it is unfortunate. I think that there was a golden opportunity here and we have lost it. Trying to get all the politicians to circle the wagons and blame everyone under the sun, which is what is happening now. This is what politicians do well. And me being a politician, I know it. But the difference is you have to be a patriot before a politician. They brought all these leaders together, and what they're going to do is they're going to blame judges, they're going to blame society, they're going to blame the community, they're going to blame teachers, they're going to blame parents, they're going to blame everybody other than the individuals themselves. So even at the front page, you blame the judges. The reason the judges can give bail for persons who commit murder is because you, as a politician, have that in your law. So don't come and blame the judges when the judges, you leave the judges with the flexibility and you want the judges to make a decision based on their conscience. But you as a politician could say, look, it is mandatory that you should not, if you're held with a firearm, you should not have bail for 120 days. And you could, or if it is murder, it should be a non-bailable offense. So what we are seeing now is politicians trying to deflect the issue. And that is exactly what Fitzgerald Hines has also done when he said that it is not the role of politicians to come up with an anti-crime plan. But what is the reason for the crime symposium then? It must be to come up with something good. I would have expected that if you want something of value here, instead of bringing politicians with absolutely no knowledge whatsoever in law enforcement, what should have happened is have the heads of the police service, the defense force, the intelligence agencies, those three individuals from each of the CARICOM countries meet. This happened a few decades ago. It was known as SINSEC. Every year they would meet for 2 or 3 days to come up with a proper template to deal with transnational crime around the region. This year is going to be nothing other than a talk shop and something very cosmetic to deflect from the country the incompetence of the present government to deal with the issue.
Former Commissioner of Police, you would understand and you would know, especially as a politician now, that there are some fundamental social issues that lead to the crime that we see being faced in Trinidad and in Tobago. But when we speak specifically to Trinidad, there are some underlying social issues that you think these conferences should really focus on in regards to prevention. Can you tell us about any of those social issues that you think should be taking precedence in these conversations?
Oh, excellent question. Excellent. I think I have been in about 10 interviews in the last 24 hours. I think this is one of the best questions. Well done. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because what you have just done is to expose the shortcomings of what is known as criminologists in Trinidad and Tobago. That is the role of a criminologist to do. And a criminologist's role is very critical towards reducing crime in a country. Criminology is now a science. It is no longer based on guess and belief and just giving your personal views. What you have done, the only way you can come up with proper solutions to those social issues is via criminologists doing interviews with felons, with young persons, persons who may be affected by crime. And from there, you'll be able to understand what is the issue as it pertains to the country, because each country will have a different threat assessment as it pertains to what you just spoke about, which is known as secondary crime prevention. Primary involves law enforcement, hard targeting, patrols, roadblocks, policing. Tertiary is the criminal justice system. Secondary involves the social aspects and avenues to try to get persons to turn away from a life of crime by utilizing their energies in the right manner. So that is a critical issue. That is not done properly in this country because we have no criminologists, none, who actually do what a criminologist is supposed to do. Go to the prisons, do interviews, have a meet with persons who have been affected by crime. And then when you do these interviews, you're able now to package and realize this seems to be the issue. So, for example, when it is that when they said that unemployment was not a concern for crime. When Fitzgerald Hines said the jury is still out, it shows his ignorance in understanding criminology, because in the United Kingdom, 95% of felons who are arrested for robbery, they were asked by the criminologist, why did you commit the robbery? And they said it's because of unemployment and the need for money. It is not justification, but it shows the importance of the government now needing to find avenues to reduce the unemployment level. And those are the type of things that criminologists should do. But what they do here, they sit back, they wait for the media to call them, and they give their personal views, which does nothing to direct us as to how best to solve the problem. So for it to be done, it certainly cannot be done by politicians going in Hyatt and giving their personal view as to how best we can improve the social shortcomings, because each island we have a different social shortcoming, and you might need to put your resources in different manners, whether it is improvement in sport, role modeling, education, employment. So it will all vary, and that can only be done by criminologists doing and conducting interviews, so you can utilize those resources of social development in the right manner.
It has been the idea that floats around in the public domain that a lot of the crimes that we see taking place, and we see some of the lower level criminals being arrested, is just the public manifestation of a deeper crime network that includes a lot of more influential persons, more richer persons who we would never ever see being arrested on the streets. What are your comments on that particular ideology in regards to crime in Trinidad and Tobago? There's always the idea that crime would never stop because the real criminals are never really being arrested.
And that was the reason why certain people wanted me removed as as our commissioner of police, because that is exactly what I was doing. When I formed SWORD, the Special Operation Response Team, they were polygraphed officers to ensure that no rogue police officer could cover the tracks or tip off those persons involved in white collar crime. When I formed the white collar crime unit, assembling the cyber crime unit, the FIB, the ACIB, and all of these different units under one, we were starting to pinpoint certain things to follow the money, to be able to target individuals who we believed were instrumental towards causing crime. And that is inclusive of this government that continues to give hundreds of millions of dollars in state contracts to criminal elements. And they do that, I can see that for no other reason other than to ensure that they will vote for them. So when it is you give a $5 million contract for a box train to a gang, and the cost of the box train is 1 million, they take that 4 million and utilize that now towards purchasing more weapons, putting more hits on other gang members to get their contracts. And this is all part of the process of senior persons with shirts and tie indirectly being involved in crime. So when I started targeting certain individuals, that is where it is I stepped on toes, and politicians realized this man is getting in it too deep. And that's why as soon as I left, they shut down SORT. The white collar crime unit has now been virtually disbanded. And that is the sad thing. When politicians have that ability to manipulate the process of a commissioner of police because they believe that he is getting too close to us, it shows what is known as democratic dictatorship. So that is the reason why I've returned to be a politician again. So come 2025, I will continue where I left off as Commissioner of Police. I will continue where I left off as the Minister of National Security in 2015. In that period in 2015, it was the lowest number of serious crime in 31 years. My last year as Commissioner of Police, it was the highest reduction in violent crime in 30 years. I intend to continue to do exactly what you spoke about. There was a reason why they shut down SOAR. There was a reason why it is they didn't want me there, because I was doing exactly what you spoke about. I was starting to get closer and closer to targeting those so-called big fish. And I stepped on those toes that affected certain individuals.
How do you feel the removal of a number of these units are currently affecting the crime situation that we see happening right now?
Yeah, well, it is automatic, it's definite. As the Minister of National Security, in total contrast to the false, misleading, and even ignorance of the comments by Fitzgerald Hines that the role of a Minister of National Security is not to come up with anti-crime plans. He is wrong, because that is what I did as Minister of National Security. And through the People's Partnership Government, we set up the National Operations Center, the Community Comfort Patrol, the Highway Patrol, the Rapid Response Unit, the Energy Sector Security Initiative, the National Security Special Operation Group, the National Security Training Academy. All of these things played a big part to ensure that it was the lowest number of serious crime in 31 years. As soon as I left office and the government changed, they pulled the plug on all of these things, and then bam, you started seeing crime escalating. When I became commissioner of police, I reignited several of these things, where it is I formed the Special Operation Response Team, the White Collar Crime Unit, the Operational Command Center, the Emergency Response Patrol, GPS tracking of all vehicles to ensure an immediate response. So there we were now getting a 2 to 3 minute response to any distress call on most occasions. That is what caused the criminals to peg back, because they realized now that the product of opportunity was no longer there. As soon as I left, you've pulled the plug on all of these things. So the criminals know now there's no 999 system, there's no app reporting, there's no online reporting to tip off the police, there's no more technology where we can anticipate crime, which is known as predictive policing. So they know they can go at Residence Nightclub, which is opposite the commissioner's residence, 2 minutes from St. James Station, and you can kill someone, and 45 minutes later is when the police will turn up. And this is no fault of the officers. So by doing that, and we can even look at Tobago. As the Minister of National Security with Tobago, I set up an arm of the National Operations Center. We had covert operatives in the police service working the beaches, put in proper systems at the ports to prevent illegal weapons and drugs entering the ports to get to Tobago. All of these things have been shut down, which has put Tobago even at higher risk. So yes, if it is that you pull the plug and you sabotage and you deliberately politicize national security, you're going to pay the prices what the country is getting now.
Now, I have a hard question to ask, and that question is, do you really think that this government wants to fight crime, or is it in their best interest to fight crime, seeing that a number of these crime fighting mechanisms were removed?
No, no. The thing is, I know I'm an honest person. I mean, I don't like. I can easily use and say that the government that they want this to happen. As it pertains, there may be individuals in government that may want this to happen because they benefit financially. This prime minister, I have never seen him as a person who will deliberately want criminals to succeed. I think he's very passionate about certain things. What the problem with him is that he lets his ego get the better of him, and his ego turns to bitterness and hatred and vindictiveness, and that takes precedence over what is right for the country. So you may have the difference in opinion with someone, but and this is what happened with himself and myself. In cabinet in 2021, I was told by several ministers that he said that if he could get 10 Gary Griffiths, he could transform Trinidad and Tobago. When I decided not to reapply for the position as Commissioner of Police, he actually contacted the AG and told the AG to change the law, and the law was changed to ensure that I will act as Commissioner of Police after my term ended. Messages were sent to me to reapply. So that showed his confidence he had in me. When certain people got to him, he is very naive, and he took the bait because those individuals benefited from crime, and they realized there were certain things that I was doing that was affecting them. He took the bait, and instead of him appreciating the fact that you made a mistake because you were misled by questionable elements to do what you did, he will not swallow his ego and his pride to do what is right for the country. He'd rather see the country drown in blood. Up to now, you will think that if I'm a prime minister and I realize, look, this person, I despise that individual, but if I feel he can assist me, and I will do so. He would not. When he gets angry and upset, he does not let logic prevail. I, as a patriot, will be a patriot before a politician. I want the government to succeed. I want the prime minister to succeed. I want the commissioner to succeed. And I will help them in any way that I can, because failure for me to do so will take away anything for me to consider myself a patriot. But because of pettiness, ego, arrogance, he will not do that. And he would rather see the country drown in blood than to say, look, let me speak to Gary Griffith and find out what it is that you did as a minister and as a commissioner that had crime going down. In fact, he has now tried to divert and mislead the country by stating that change of ministers of national security cannot reduce crime. That is a lie. For the last 30 years, every time the PNM has ministers of national security in government, be it Howard Chinley, Martin Joseph, Eddie Dillon, Stuart Young, or Fitzgerald Hines, crime has escalated, except for the year when I was commissioner. Every year, when the PNM is not in government, whether it is UNC or the People's Partnership, and the Minister of National Security, be it Joe Theodore, Basdio Pandey, John Sandy, Jack Warner, Gary Griffith, Carl Alfonso, crime has gone down. So it shows that the catalyst for crime reduction is the implementation of government policies, and the main person to be involved in that are the ministers of national security who would draft the policies, formulate it, and then the law enforcement agencies will operationalize it. So the prime minister's statement that it would change of ministers would not make a difference. It shows his ignorance in understanding national security. But I don't think that he wants crime to go up because this is going to ensure the removal of PNM in 2025, and that's the last thing he wants. But because of his ego and his arrogance, he will not swallow his pride to do what is better for the country.
Right. And before we go to a quick break, I want to ask, what type of structure do you think would be most effective for these type of crime fighting symposium?
Well, definitely one where not just the line minister of national security, but his experts. You need the technical persons there because if you don't have that, you're going to have a talk shop, and that is what is going on now. Because the politicians there have no knowledge in law enforcement, in criminology, in intelligence gathering. So they're just talking and they're going to babble and they're going to blame everything. They're going to talk about the community, social development, children, parents, teachers, even Fitzgerald Hines, pornographic music, pornographic material, violent music. So that is what they do. It becomes a talk shop. What should have happened is that bringing in the technical experts, that is where you'll have all the commissioners of police, all the chiefs of defense staff, all the heads of the intelligence departments coming in now and coming up with a proper structure to deal with the reduction of transnational crime. That is the only value you could get from this type of symposium. Other than that, every single country will have a different view, a different concern, a different threat. The majority of the islands in the Caribbean are not violent prone. It is primarily Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. So you can't put a box of a crime plan, anti-crime plan, with Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica so in comparison to one or two small islands where you'll have two or three murders for the year. You're going to fail. So I think the experts should have been there behind these ministers of national security. Failure to do that, it is going to be a talk shop.
Okay, and what about the international experts? Do you think it's important for them to be able to look at some of world best practices in order to implement here in Trinidad and Tobago and throughout the region?
Well, again, by doing that, bringing in foreign experts to speak in general about crime and crime reduction, again, it's you're just shooting in the air because what they will be speaking about is a general concept about crime. They will not have an in-depth understanding and analysis of the problems that exist in each island in the Caribbean. So again, this is where the experts should have been there because the relevant commissioners of police, the chiefs of defense staff, the head of the intelligence departments, they will know the problems, they will know the issues, they will know the lack of communication and coordination between different islands in the Caribbean that can help, through proper coordination, stop that type of transnational crime, be it illegal weapons being transported, human trafficking, illegal drugs going from one island to the other. That is the value you could get from a symposium like that. But that could only take place not by bringing international experts to speak, not by bringing politicians to blame everybody else, but by using the individuals who are appointed presently in national security, who have the operational appointment to implement the items that are required because they are aware of the shortcomings. They know what is required to ensure an improvement in CARICOM security through better unified operational systems to deal with transnational crime.
Some of the mechanisms that should be put in place to ensure that these type of symposiums are not just a talk shop, but they are effective in being able to contribute towards the fight against crime in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, the theme this year was violence as a public health issue. Can you speak to us a little bit about that? Because I have a couple questions that I would like to ask you in regards to how this really does affect the health sector, because we see a number of the issues that are being treated with at the hospital, like the main hospitals, are crime related. This is due to the conversation or the contribution that was made by the Prime Minister yesterday when he began to list out how much it actually costs to treat patients that suffer violent wounds that are as a result of violent crimes.
Yes, certainly. Yet again, it's another reflection. I have never heard something so ridiculous in my life. What he has done is basically try to palm it off to try to show the how it can affect the taxpayers based on someone getting shot in their leg and whatever. But the fact of the matter is that if you really had a concern about the health of Trinidad and Tobago, there are just three major factors that contribute towards 80% of the deaths in Trinidad and Tobago. Three major things. And if it is you focus on those items and put systems in place, you can actually save many lives, because persons with heart complications and suffering from cancer and so forth, they suffer immensely because we have a system that is so outdated and backward that people spend several months for a simple procedure to deal with their heart. And then, but if it is you have $150,000, you can go to a private clinic. And while you wait that 6 months, the arteries can get clogged. So those are the things you will think that if you have a concern about a national concern of a health situation, you must look at your own health environment. But what you have done is pinpoint to say, well, if someone gets shot in his leg, this is what it will cost. If you want to go towards how it affects the country based on crime, don't look at the person being shot in the leg. Look at the death of the individual. Anytime you lose a human resource as a life, what happens after? When it is you speak about the children now being without a father, a family now being without a breadwinner, you have now lost the productivity of a hardworking individual who could have contributed to our country. He's not speaking about that. Somebody gave him what it will cost to fix a leg and a gunshot wound. That is as simplistic and as petty as you can get. And that should not be the focus, because you have turned it into a health concern. Why not a concern as it pertains to the community, to society, a socio-economic problem? You could call it anything you want, but that is irrelevant in the scheme of things. What should be happening is not what it should be graded as, but how you intend to stop it, how you intend to prevent it, not how much it is costing. The country is fully aware of the dangers of illegal weapons. The country is aware of the problems that a country can be affected with as it pertains to our size and having 600 plus murders per annum. But what are you doing to stop it? Not trying to explain and categorize it based on whether it is a health issue. That is irrelevant. It does not help in any way. So by trying to have a cosmetic approach to try to speak about if it is a health issue, that does not in any way help towards dealing with the issue. He cannot and does not know, similar to Fitzgerald Hines, they do not know what to do. They do not know how to put in policies. They don't know how to implement policies to have it operationalized. And what they do know to do is anything that was done by someone who does not have a PNM party card, we must pull the plug and shut it down. And when you do that, that is why we are suffering.
Well, in the Prime Minister's defense, the theme for this year, for the symposium, is violence as a health issue, the crime challenge. So I'm guessing that he really wanted to demonstrate the economic burden on the health sector in regards to
No, but that's my
crime.
point. It is not. When you look in the scheme of things of the billions upon billions, the several $billion given to the Ministry of Health on an annual basis, in comparison to the number of people who are treated with a gunshot wound, it is almost irrelevant in the budget of a six. He is speaking about $150,000 for a gunshot wound compared to a $6 billion budget. So if it is that it's a few $1 million to repair the legs of persons who are shot, that is irrelevant. You call a crime symposium and bring in prime ministers around CARICOM to state that we usually spend about $10 million per annum roughly to deal with gunshot wounds in a $6 billion budget. Really? That is what you will see fit. The focus should not be based on it is if it is that we put an end to murder, to shootings, we will save $10 million in the Ministry of Health. That is irrelevant. That can be the heading for a crime symposium, trying to save several $1 million to stop gunshot wounds in a hospital. When you have a $6 billion budget, and the majority of that, you have three major issues of health that has caused the deaths of the majority of citizens in this country annually. That is the health issue. So let us not try to put this into a health situation. This is a lack of leadership, a lack of responsibility, shirking of responsibility. And the focus of this symposium should be how are we going to deal to prevent the problem and not how much it is costing the taxpayers to deal with a gunshot wound in your leg.
Right. And so another aspect of this public health issue that is seldom discussed in the public domain and especially on the media is the right to proper health care for prisoners and for criminals. This is something that we don't really talk about. Um, we see a lot of complaints coming out about the type of treatment that prisoners are faced with while they're behind bars. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the type of investments that can or should be made to ensure better healthcare within the prison system?
Well, definitely, it has to do with, again, proper management and leadership, and it's absolutely no fault of the senior officers in the prison service. As the Minister of National Security, I was aware of this situation, but because at that time, the Ministry of Justice, they were responsible for prisons, so I had very little input in dealing with that. I drafted the plan, put it into the Ministry of National Security, and changing the Ministry of Justice to have that separated. But it is a critical point, not just in that aspect of dealing with their personal concerns pertaining to health issues, but it has to do with the whole concept of rehabilitation. Trinidad and Tobago, our recidivism rate is one of the highest in the Caribbean. And those are the things that they will not speak about in this crime symposium. They will speak about how much it will cost for a gunshot wound to be repaired in the hospital. But when you look at recidivism, if you don't have a proper system to rehabilitate the prisoners, what is going to happen is that a young man charged for a misdemeanor goes into prison. He stays in the remand yard for several years. Sometimes they spend more time in the remand yard than the actual length of the sentence had they been convicted. And then when they come out, because of who they associated themselves with, they come out a more hardened criminal. So the concept of persons going to jail is not just for a form of punishment, but more important, to find avenues to rehabilitate them. And if our recidivism rate is we have about 50, I think it's 53% of persons who commit crime are persons who are previous criminals. So it means that those persons who have been convicted or held and came back out, we have not done a proper system to rehabilitate them, and even inclusive of the concerns you speak about with their health issues. But that is what is critical, and that is why it is I drafted that Ministry of Justice to deal with this situation. Unfortunately, it was not done as much as it should have by the relevant line ministers. They dropped the ball. But I intend to ensure that this time around, come 2025, that Ministry of Justice will understand it's not just about building extra prisons, but it is to ensure that the prisoners in there, those felons, can be rehabilitated, and having criminologists come and meet with them, interview them, find out their concerns, and then the criminologists can now take this information, bring it to the law enforcement agencies and the state to state this is what is causing the problem. If we put more focus on this aspect in our country, it can reduce these individuals committing the crime.
Excellent point that you made in regards to the rehabilitation of criminals or even persons who just have been to prison, because we see a lot of the persons that are committing crimes are not first time offenders. They are repeat offenders, and a lot of them have been to prison before. So, as you said, the whole sociological contribution towards using the data to help fight crime and to help rehabilitate um, those prisoners, it's extremely important in the whole discussion on how do we fight crime from the different aspects. We like to talk
Correct.
about the social aspect of the community, as you said, and the parents and the teachers and the school and the education, but seldom do we hear them actually talking about prison reform and rehabilitation for prisoners. And so, before you go, because as we wrap up this interview this morning, if you were given the opportunity to present at the symposium today, what do you think is a critical message that should be echoed across the Caribbean, the CARICOM region, for leaders to understand in this current fight against crime?
Well, definitely communication and coordination. As I mentioned, 20 odd years ago, there was something called SINSEC, where annually the commissioners of police, chiefs of defense staff, and the heads of the intelligence agencies would all attend in different islands in the Caribbean. It was actually chaired by the United States. The US understood the value of it, they actually funded it. And that is more important. This crime symposium, politicians blaming everybody else, inclusive of the judiciary, is not going to solve the problem. It cannot and should not be a finger pointing and blame game. That is not how you deal with an issue. You analyze the situation, and then you are able to utilize your limited national security resources in an effective and efficient manner. That can only be done by bringing the experts and those who head the law enforcement agencies together, circling the wagons. That is going to assist greatly in the reduction of transnational crime, illegal entry of weapons, drugs, and even human trafficking. That is something could be of more value. What we're going to see here is nothing more than a talk shop, and we are not going to get results. Every time you have a meeting, there must be results. There must be something to say, what are we getting out of it? Where do we go from here? You're not going to get anything with this because these are prime ministers who, again, they have a country to lead. They are not experts in national security, so they do not know. The experts should have been there dealing with it. So I will strongly recommend that that is what should happen. And again, trying to get people to understand and appreciate the use of technology. In the Caribbean, many of these islands, we do not understand how important technology is. Technology is what I use that put an end to kidnappings in Trinidad and Tobago. We were able to start arresting persons whilst they held the victims in homes and arrested kidnappers. That's why kidnapping stopped. That's why home invasion stopped. That's why extortion and all that stopped. When it is you fear technology, you're going to prevent what is known as predictive policing, stopping the crime before it happens. This when I just I brought in the scanners to that you can actually go through the container and see if there are weapons in the containers, because 99.5% of murders committed by weapons in Trinidad and Tobago are illegal weapons. Those are the type of things that we should do and appreciate. Had I been there, had I been speaking, if I had a position of authority, this is the direction I would have gone. Unfortunately, this prime minister, because of his pettiness, because of him trying to actually cover and shield the fact of his own failure, this is nothing more than a cosmetic talk shop. And unfortunately, it is not going to be of much value.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time out to bring some context in the entire view of this CARICOM regional symposium to fight against crime. Some interesting points brought to the forefront there. And again, it's always a pleasure to have you, always a pleasure to have these discussions with you. And again, thank you for giving us your time this morning.
My pleasure.